By the way, I got something special for you guys. Finally added the thing up on the screen. You'll see here in a minute. Hello, test. All right, I think it works. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully everybody had a good Valentine's Day, first of all, and a good weekend, as always. We're gonna touch up a little bit for the next 5 minutes before we actually get into it, because usually I start at 7. It's 6:55. I started a little bit early. Sometimes I have technical difficulties, so start a little bit early. I want to show you that now I do have the scripture up on the screen, so you guys can maybe follow along. It might help some people for sure. We do use the King James Version. It's one of the original versions of the Bible, because you got to think every single time that it's like a newer version or modified, it gets touched by man. So man keeps changing words a little bit, and sometimes that can throw some stuff off and meaning. And I'm even sure that they might even take some things in or out. So there is that. I'll just leave that up on the screen. All right. So that'll be nice. Hopefully I keep up with it as it's new, so hopefully there ain't no problems with it. But so I said last week we're gonna do 14 and 15, but we're not. We're just gonna do 14. There is a big section in my or a piece in my Bible that since I have the student Bible, where it talks about like the King Herods, so we'll be going over that as well. And a couple of the different things that happen in chapter 14 is pretty powerful and meaningful, and it's very important that we understand it very thorough. So we'll be getting into it pretty deep here for a second. I just wanted to say that last stream was pretty important, because we talked about like the different seeds. Jesus did a bunch of parables, which is like kind of like stories that can relate to the full meaning of what he's saying, since people couldn't grasp it, and it's still hard to grasp. But he talked about like the different seeds that fell on different like paths. There was 4 different paths that it fell on, and only one of them would end up getting accepted by, to the kingdom of heaven. Basically, don't think of it just as the kingdom of heaven and going to heaven, because I feel like that's not like the true meaning behind it. It's more of like, what God accepts, what God is pleased with, okay? The way we grow, okay? So the seeds is us, and then like the roots is our faith and our knowledge in Christ in the Bible. And then that depends on how we grow and how we produce fruit, okay? So the different pathways, different things happen. I explained it in yesterday's stream, or not yesterday, last week's stream. So just go back in the video if you want to know and understand more about that, because like I said, it was very important. Because there's a lot of different ways that we can try to follow God's word and live for him. Different extreme measures, right? So like the first ones fell on pathway and didn't even grow. So those are people who don't even believe, don't even really give it a chance. And I think that's very important, because at least read the Bible once, the full thing, before you even make a choice. You should never make a choice on anything if you don't really understand it. That's actually foolish. And that goes for anything. Do all your research, basically, before making a decision. And something so important, I think it's smart. So that's why we do this Bible study here. 1, for my sake, and then for 2, I can help like share it with others as well. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. I'm all ears. Even if I can't get around to it right away, I'll eventually get around to it, but I can see the chat. So got my cup of coffee here. All right, so it's about 7, so let's go ahead and get started a little bit here. So this is going to be chapter 14, and what we're going to be talking about, the beginning is pretty rough. It's pretty bad, because it's the death of John the Baptist. As we know up to this point, that he was captured and he's in prison, and you will see why he was in prison, and then we will find out what is the root and the reason why he ended up dying. And a little bit later, well, I'll probably go straight into the Herods, the section that's in my Bible, because King Herod is the one who ended up allowing it to happen. So we'll just end up touching it up like with that, and then we get into something really, really good, which is like the 5,000 who got fed, and also how Jesus walks on the sea. Okay, Jesus walks on water. And a lot of people that really don't understand the Bible, they have heard of this story. Everybody knows how Jesus walked on water, but they don't really fully understand why, or what the concept was. They misinterpret why he even did it. They probably think he did it just because he's powerful. That's not why he did it. Not in any kind of way. He already know he didn't have to flex his power. Okay? He's not a show-off by any means. So it gets really good to understand on why and what happens. And it really doesn't even have to do with Jesus. But, of course, his message has to actually do with Peter. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so this is... Now, I'm not going to read from the screen, but I will like try to keep it up as I'm reading. And I'm going to try to read kind of fast. Usually I skip some things, but we'll see. Go from there. Alright. So. Alright. Should be good, I think. I hope. Alright, here we go. So chapter 14, verse 1. It says, "At that time Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus, and said unto his servants, This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. Okay, so he knows about Jesus. Jesus is preaching. He's getting multitudes of people, like tons of people basically. He's doing miracles. So he knows of him, and John the Baptist claimed that he's the Messiah and that he's coming, that Jesus, you know. So Herod has respect, probably also out of fear of John the Baptist and Jesus, like the whole concept of everything that's happening. Like, oh, it could be true, like even if he didn't fully believe, right? And he's the king, so like you gotta think, like, if Jesus is around doing all these things, like, what's a king to Jesus? Nothing. No king can be going around doing miracles and stuff. So he you know, feels powerless in a way. All right, so verse 3. For Herod had laid hold on John and bound him and put him in prison for Herod's sake, his brother Philip's wife. For John said unto him, it is not lawful for thee to have her. Okay, so King Herod ended up stealing his brother's wife. All right, and John told him that that's unlawful. You're not supposed to do that by God. Okay, you're not supposed to, just because you envy somebody, you don't go steal their wife. And just because he was the king, he used his power probably to do so. Verse 5, and when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude, because they counted him as a prophet. Remember how he had fear of Jesus and prophet and the multitudes? Exactly. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodes danced before them and pleased Herod. All right, so he was pleased on his birthday. She did a dance, and you know, it's his stepdaughter. Whereupon he promised an oath to give her whatever she asked for. Okay, now get this, get what she asked for here. So this is his stepdaughter, and we're at what, verse 8, right? Alright, here we go. Where does it go to? 13? Okay. And she, being before instructed by her mother, said, give me John the Baptist's head. It says on a charger, but it's a plate, okay, on a platter. Give me his head on a platter, she said. But she was told by her mother. Remember, this is his stepdaughter, so it wasn't his real daughter. And remember, he stole Philip's wife, and John said that was wrong. Okay, so the wife took this very personal, and she directed her to tell her daughter to do this. And the king was sorry, nevertheless, for the oath's sake, since he gave her his word, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given to her. And he sent and beheaded John in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took up the body and buried it, and went and told Jesus. All right. So like I said, it was pretty dark and pretty like rough. Basically out of vengeance and revenge, and so the because it even says in the Bible, we've already read it several times, that when the truth is told, if we're not, especially if we're trying to live for God, when we hear the truth, like, it hurts, but especially if you don't if you don't change for the better, then you're rebuking it, or you're gonna feel attacked, because you gotta understand, it's God's way, it's not our way. It's not, we don't get to make the rules, okay? But we have to understand what is right and what is wrong, and it's good to get the knowledge and understand the Bible thoroughly, so that way you can really get to know maybe why it is the way it is, the way he sees things. You know, it makes really good sense. And a lot of times we suffer from the 7 deadly sins. Whenever we get a little bit upset or it's something that we don't like, we start to think emotionally, and then we're not really thinking like logically or spiritually. So it doesn't even matter what the truth is. We start just getting in our feelings. And that's exactly what happened with his daughter. Or not the daughter, but the wife. Which is pretty crazy because she used manipulation and a lie. Well, not really a lie, but manipulation to get her way. She used her stepdaughter. He was going to give the stepdaughter what she wanted. Instead, the mother, she ended up doing what her mother wanted. Right? So really, I'm sure his mother, I'm sure the mother actually asked King Herod to do this a long time ago, and he just kept refusing. But eventually he kind of got tricked into giving his word, keeping his word. All right, because I'm pretty positive she didn't say, when he asked her, I'll give you anything you want, what do you want? Well, mother wants this. He'd have been like, well, I don't care what mother wants, what do you want? Okay, but after it did happen, she gave it to, she showed her mother. So it's like, it's trickery. All right, it's sin. So it's just a shame that it happened like that. So now let's go ahead and hurry up and read this section here where it talks about, let me see here. Let me get this next part on the screen here. But I'm not reading from the Bible right now. I'm reading my section. It's about the Herods. It'll help explain this a little bit more thorough for you guys. All right. The Herod family weaves its way through the background of the New Testament like minor supporting characters in a play. Oddly enough, in their own minds and in the minds of most people then, they were major players, like the Kennedys in modern America or the many royal families in European history. The Herods were a family dynasty. They ruled behalf of the Romans with nearly absolute power. Such power did not impress the early Christians. However, they worshipped a higher authority, one whom the Herods were too spiritually dense to recognize. All right. So just like I said earlier, that they had a lot of power, but they were powerless because they were controlling the territory where there was a lot of believers. Okay, and then the Messiah comes at the same time. So, and this all goes to the first Herod because there's a couple of them. Because you know how like families would keep the throne in the blood, like in the family? Alright, so it's about to start to explain that. It says 3 different rulers go by the name of Herod in the New Testament. A 4th, Agrippa, descended from the same family. All 3 clashed with Jesus or his followers. Herod the Great reigned as king when Jesus was born. We talked about that in the first stream, I think. And he killed all the little kids, all the boys 2 years and younger, because he tried to get rid of them. He met the 3 wise men, pointed them toward Bethlehem, and then when they disappeared without identifying the baby king, had all the infants in the area slaughtered. That was in Matthew 2. Other historical sources suggest that such behavior was too typical of this Herod. He even had his own sons murdered when he thought they threatened his power. Okay, power hungry. Sins. Always think about sins whenever there's something that somebody seems like they're doing something crazy. It always roots back to the 7 sins. It's very important to understand that because it's the source of the evil. Okay, because we are just in this world. This world is wicked and it's controlled by Satan. So a lot of us suffer from one of the 7 deadly sins. And this particular moment, it's called greed. Okay, greed can be in the form of money. It can be in the form of power. Okay, in this case, it was power. Killed his own son. Okay, because he threatened his power. Isn't that crazy? That's bizarre to think nowadays, but this kind of stuff did happen. All right. And it still exists today. People would kill their own family. And this goes back in history. This goes back not even in like the Bible. This goes in any kind of history that you read up on. So like for you, some people who are skeptical about the Bible and whatnot, the 7 deadly sin of greed through power of kings, there has been many incidences where they would slaughter and kill their own friends or the next era or their own family to keep power. Okay, this goes back even in the Roman history. I watched a whole documentary on it. So this this still goes on today, you guys. This still goes on today. Greed and power does not disappear. It actually only gets stronger and worse, probably. All right, so let's continue here. Herod the Tetrarch, also known as Herod Antipas, sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of this, Antipas, was among Herod the Great's sons who survived the violence. At his father's death, he took command over Jesus' home of Galilee. When John the Baptist offended Herod and his mistress by criticizing their morals, basically speaking the truth, saying that God is not pleased by it, that you should not do it. And that's what happens in this world. And God says, you know, evil and people who don't believe, if you tell them your side of like the morals, if you just tell them the truth of what you think, technically it's what God thinks, they get offended by it. They get attacked. Instead of just ignoring it and saying, oh, okay, that's what you believe, that's fine, they tend to feel attacked. They feel to blow it out of proportion and try to like get revenge or try to attack you. Since they feel attacked, they feel like they have to attack back, but you're never attacking them. You're just telling them your belief, your moral, what God says, and that's all it really is. But they don't see it for that. Remember I said like logically thinking, emotionals, they start to get in their feelings and they start to be mean about it, basically, like hatred, evil, basically. All right. So Herod imprisoned John and later had him beheaded. Jesus himself fell into Herod's hands during his trial. Herod had heard of Jesus and hoped to see him do a miracle. When Jesus wouldn't cooperate, Herod ridiculed him and sent him back to Pilate or something. That happens in Luke, so I can't wait for that to happen. So eventually King Herod is gonna try to force Jesus to do a miracle, and Jesus will not do a miracle unless the person, he doesn't do it for show. Remember, he's not doing it to show off his power. He's not doing it to show that he's better than anybody. Every single time Jesus does a miracle, the person has to come to him and they have to have strong faith in him, and believe that he's the Messiah in a way. So that's why a lot of times, every single time a miracle happens, Jesus says this first. He says, he's mentioned it a couple times about how strong their faith is. Then the second step is he'll say, I forgive you of your sins. Okay? Because in their heart, they have believed and made that choice. And Jesus knows that. So that's the only way he'll make the miracle happen. And then he makes the miracle happen. You know, get up, you are healed. So there's 3 steps that have to happen. Okay? Well, 2, it's really just before the miracle happens, they have to have strong faith, and then he forgives them of their sins, and then boom. Okay? Because back then, they thought, technically they had to do an offering and stuff like that. Pretty much give up everything that they owned or had. Like, it was their way of surrendering. Like, I'll give you all, like, I give you all of me. I'll like, try my best to live for you, basically. So they would give up, like, offerings, to show that. But then after Jesus dies and stuff, you don't have to do that no more. He makes it a lot easier for us. All right, so I'm almost done here. Herod Agrippa the first, I guess, grandson of Herod the Great, continued the pattern into the next generation. He ruled Jerusalem when the church first began growing there. He clamped down on early Christians, executing James and arresting a number of others, including Peter. When Peter escaped, with God's help, Herod had the guards executed. This happens in Acts 12. I don't know if Acts is in the New Testament, but I'm gonna guess it is, because Jesus is here, Jesus got all his disciples, Jesus gets crucified, and then they start to attack his disciples. And just understand that it's not just the disciples that get attacked, it's just Christians in general. Remember how I said earlier, when people are suffering from sin, we all have, okay? So like when I was suffering from my sin, okay? Because no one's perfect. When I'm suffering from my sin, when I was a sinner, even though I knew better, because I was brought up earlier as a Christian, and I knew better, I had some knowledge, but even if I didn't have the knowledge, okay? When I'm dwelling and doing my sin, it brings me pleasure, you know, I've decided to do it, so I don't care at that point about what's right, what's wrong. And then if somebody were to mention it, yes, I would probably feel attacked about it. But at the same time, well, it depends. It depends on how they say it, but at the same time, a lot of times Christians do it because they care for you. You know, they just want you to have the knowledge of it. Sometimes they might not know how to say it right, and it might come off as attacking or something like that. And I think that's something that we all need to take into account, is how we approach people and how we mention things and how we talk to things. Because it's not to be, we're not supposed to be judgmental. We're not supposed to force it. But, you know, if it gets brought up, then you can say, you know, you can bring up like the sins and like how it could be wrong, that lifestyle, stuff like that. Get them to realize it. Not so much make them feel worse. Don't belittle them for it. Because you got to forgive them, for they do not know. Sometimes they might not even really know about really the Bible and God and like how wrong it really is and stuff like that. Not everybody has the same knowledge. So like how they're attacking disciples, people just attack God in general. God is a spirit, God is all good. So when somebody is an actual full Christian, they are just trying their best to be like Jesus. Jesus is our role model. Jesus is like, so the way God would want us all to live would be how Jesus lived, because he didn't have an ounce of sin in his body. Okay, he every temptation he said no. We don't. Okay, sometime in our life we gave in. Sometimes we struggle, sometimes longer than others, sometimes worse than others. So it's our job to try our best to be like Jesus, because that is what pleases God, right? So if God is all good and Satan is the opposite, we're either one or the other. You're either cold or you're hot. Okay? There's no lukewarm. So it's to understand that you're either one or the other. So, and he doesn't want any of it. He doesn't stand for any of it. So that's why it's important for us to try to be, as you know, like literally try our best. Not just say it, but actually do it. Okay? Actions speak louder than words, right? Alright, so let's finish. Acts tells us that Herod Agrippa died a sudden death because he gave not God the glory when a crowd of admirers held him as divine. Okay? So God, at a certain point in certain situations, when you test God, if he gets fed up or upset, like heartbroken, because we try to taunt him or we don't listen to him for a certain amount of time, he has every right to take our life. He gave us life from the beginning. He gave us life, and eventually we came here So yes, he did give us life. He's allowing, and he gives us his word. He gives us knowledge. He says every man will hear my name at least once. It's a shame that some people will never hear him more than once, because I know for a fact it took me many times, probably thousands, hundreds to thousands of times to, you know, get into the Bible, or just sermons, or anything to do with God, hundreds to thousands of times. And like, it took me forever to fully commit and really give in. So, because I'm stubborn, because everybody wants to do what they want to do, and sin is pleasurable, and you know, it's everywhere, and it's hard. Life is hard. It really is. I know. I can relate. I've been in a lot of crazy situations. So it's just so very important to understand that God is a justified God. He tries his best and he's patient with us, but once you go to a certain point with it, he has every right to say enough is enough. To say that he doesn't, just because he is of good and love, that doesn't mean that, you know, you get him upset enough that he you know, he can take away what he gave. That's not mean. What's mean is the way we treat him, is how we're acting, but we don't look at it like that. Oh, well, some people don't look at it like that, should I say. As modern people, I'm almost done here, and then we'll get back to the verses. As modern people, we tend to focus on Herod's brutal behavior, but most rulers behaved brutally in those days. Remember I said a lot of kings would even kill their own kind and stuff, like the Romans and stuff like that. Exactly my point. Even just historical documents, nothing to do with the Bible, for example. Even more importantly, in the Bible's eyes, the Herods failed to recognize the real power on earth that belonging to God. Okay. And then here's a life question for all of us. And I love these like little things in the Bible where like it's on the topic. They always have like a life question at the end. It says, what dangers do Christians in the modern world face from the lower authority of politicians and rulers? Just think about it. Remember how I said that kings and greed and power has always been around, and it always will be, and it's still here today, and it can get worse and worse. There's a good chance of it. So just keep that in mind. And I love how it says lower authority, because they act like they have big authority over everybody, but not over Christians. Because in the end, we know who the real king is. We know who's in real power. We know what will really happen in the end. God even tells us in Revelations of what's to come. And the more crazy this world gets, and the darker it gets, and the more wars and tension and all this other stuff, you see it more and more. But something to think about. It's really good, actually. All right, so now let's get into this. Verse 13. Now this is when Jesus feeds 5,000 people. He feeds, and wait until you see how this even happens. It's pretty bizarre. All right, when Jesus heard of it, he heard of John getting beheaded. When Jesus heard of it, he departed and went on his ship into a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. Now, I want you to understand this real quick. Because when you don't understand exactly God and what he stands for and how he works, okay, how love and kind and careness works, you don't actually understand how things... You think, okay, so when you don't believe it and you don't understand it, this is what somebody's going to think. Jesus just found out that John the Baptist, which, by the way, John the Baptist baptized Jesus, okay? Jesus went to him to get baptized out of all people. And then he even said that John the Baptist is one of the most righteous men in this time. But he also falls short. But no, not like fall short, but he's not as great as like the lowest person in heaven. Because at this time, a lot of things got corrupted, and that's why Jesus came. A lot of things were getting misinterpreted. Even believers were like not actually following God correctly. They thought they were, but they weren't. So John the Baptist was very highly sought by Jesus. Then he finds out that he was beheaded. Jesus could obviously have went to, the king and had God's vengeance do something. But that's not, God will do his vengeance if he wants to. Like, Jesus was put on here to preach and do everything that he has to do, which he's still doing. So, and it's not a Christian way to get revenge or to fight fire with fire, like violence with violence. Violence is evil, okay? So because thou shalt not kill, okay? So you don't try to, us as Christians don't have the right to make that choice, all right? Because Jesus is a Christian. He is the son of the Father, but he has to obey the Father, okay? God is the one who can make that choice, because God is the one who created it. He's the one who, all he's doing is he cancels a creation, okay? A creation, if he wants to, which he has in the Old Testament and whatnot, but God doesn't do it all the time and whatnot, okay? Because technically, in this situation, remember how I said he was deceived by the mother? So yeah, Herod was, because Herod, even though he gave the word, he was kind of tricked at the same time. So there's three people who actually did wrong in this scenario, not just one. So, and that was like the mother, the daughter, the stepdaughter, and then King Herod for officially giving the word. Okay, so if God is displeased and that's what God decides to do, then he'll do it, but that's for him to make, not for us to try to justify it or say, oh well, he should, because like technically we don't know everything, okay? We don't even know like the personal relationship or knowledge that any of those like King Herod had about Jesus at that time or whatnot, because I'm sure by this time this King Herod, he respected or had enough fear to keep him alive for such a long time, like it said earlier. So who knows, maybe he was kind of curious to know more. Maybe his heart was, maybe starting to want to seek from the dark side, like to the light. Because remember, it's either hot or cold. So he was actually maybe interested a little bit into it. But he got tricked in this and that, and boom. So, like I said, it's not for... So a lot of like non-believers would be like, why is Jesus running away? That's cowardly, or this and that. Jesus had a purpose on why he was there. And Jesus already said that in the name of the Father, God, we will be attacked by the dark, okay? So just think of two sides, dark and lights. No, it's not Star Wars. But the dark side will attack the light side, okay? Evil and corrupt hearts, people, will attack God inside people, Christians, okay? So sometimes lightly, just maybe, and it's really not lightly technically, because like with words, okay? And sometimes physically. So like, but we can all agree that abuse is abuse, okay? There's been people who get mentally abused emotionally or through words, and that will mess up their mind, the way they see themselves. It'll create insecurities, and they have to live with that. But that's because they were attacked by the dark side. If they were never attacked by the dark side, they would never have these doubts or these second thoughts about themselves. So the dark side will always attack the light side. So yes, using words and verbally abusing somebody is just as bad as physically abusing them. Okay? Abuse is abuse, and attacking is attacking, and wrong is wrong. Okay, that's the gist of it. Hot or cold. All right, so just remember all that. So let's get back to this. Jesus knew he had to go elsewhere because Jesus has to fulfill his whole everything he's supposed to do. So he departs into a desert. The whole multitude, his whole crowd that wants to listen to his preaching, ends up coming. Verse 14. All right, it goes to what? 18? Okay. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion towards them, and he healed their sick. Oh, I got a little section here. This is for 14 verse 5, which, whoop. Here, I'll just bring it up here just a little bit. 14:5. All right, it says this: a wife's revenge. John the Baptist offended King Herod with his blunt accusations, but Mark 6 points out of the most of the venom came from Herod's wife, whom the king had stolen from his brother Philip. Herod had mixed feelings about John. Remember how I said, like, those mixed feelings? He was maybe kind of eager to hear and listen about what he was saying, like the light side, technically God. He liked to listen to the prophet and had a respectful fear of him and his stern message. After falling into a trap set by his wife and stepdaughter, however, he succumbed to peer pressure and ordered John's execution. That's exactly what I was referring to. So he was tricked. Remember how I said there was like 3 people who was really wrong, and it was really the other 2 that kind of tricked him into it? Or else it would have never happened, because if it was to happen, he would have done it a long time ago. So, like, that's what I mean by, you know, that's maybe why God didn't actually, you know, do something about it right then and there. Okay, so verse 15, let me bring this up real quick. Okay. All right. Maybe I can do this a little bit better here. All right. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude." Okay, so basically, send everybody away. It's getting dark. There's nothing to eat around here. Jesus says this. He says, "They need not to depart." They don't need to leave, he says. Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, We have here but 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He says, the disciples only brought enough for themselves, basically. All the people who followed Jesus probably didn't bring much food. They probably lost track of time. They didn't realize how far he was going to go. They end up going pretty far, probably because what just happened. They went to a safer place to continue, basically. And so the disciples, okay, so let's just continue. He said, "Bring them to me, the 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish." And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. Whenever I say multitude, by the way, it's just the people who are wanting to listen to God's word, or Jesus's message. Okay, it's just followers. Think of it like that. And took the so Jesus took the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. Okay, so I'll just finish this up and then I'll talk about it. And they did all eat and were filled, and they took up the fragments that remained, 12 baskets full. And they had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. All right, so obviously 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish can fit in probably 1 basket. They ended up having 12 baskets full at the end. So Jesus did another miracle. Okay, whenever something is whenever something is desperation, okay, like there is no more what somebody would call hope, when there's no more hope for something, if you hold on to your faith up to that point, and beyond it, because you have to have the faith that hope, that line of like, oh, everything is useless, nothing can happen. You have to believe and understand that God can make it happen. No matter what it is. No matter what it is. There is no line with God. There is no hopelessness in any situation. So your faith has to remain strong forever and ever as things get tough, no matter what. And when things do hit that point of, you know, in this world that physically and science and this and that can't do something great, a miracle, because science in this world cannot do a miracle, okay? But God can. And when I say miracle, I mean something that's like nothing can fix a situation, but God can, okay? So everybody's starving. They don't have any food, but God wasn't done. And they were probably too far away at this point. So God knew that he had to do something for them. And Jesus knew this. So Jesus then prayed. And as it says, let me just read it again. And he commanded the multitude to sit down in the grass, and took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looked up to the heavens, and he blessed and brake bread. Jesus just asked God to do a miracle if he's willing to, because of the dire situation. But he knew that God would. Like, he had the faith to ask and to know that it would happen. It's very crazy and hard to understand on how strong our faith is supposed to be in God, because we get so blinded by this world and what we're taught, so it limits our capacity of what we think, where faith starts to dwindle down. So as it gets closer and closer to like what we think reality is, and like tough times get tough, they get so tough where we lose hope, you're supposed to have just as much faith as you did in the beginning. If your faith is dwindling as things get tougher, that's a problem. That's why it's important to strengthen our faith and our understanding of God, and understand. And it's the most amazing part and parts to really grasp is how God helped and handled Jesus. Because Jesus was the perfect image of how we're supposed to be, and how much faith we're supposed to have. And look what he did for Jesus. But a lot of times he would not help Jesus until the end. Even Jesus's faith was tested. Like Jesus, because God could have intervened many times, but Jesus didn't ask for God to intervene ever, until it probably went beyond that point of hopelessness. Like it goes past that, and then eventually Jesus is like, I know who can take care of this. I just got to ask him. But you got to have that faith that even when things are getting tough, God still has you. God will still, he's always in control. But that's only if you're following him 100%. Remember, hot and cold? You have to be 100% following him, and he'll take care of you no matter what it is. Okay? Now we're going to get into another section here. Let's see. Verse 22. Where something very similar happens as well. And pay attention to what is said, because it's very important to understand this. Alright. We're almost kind of done. There's only 36 verses, and this is all kind of the same story. Alright. So this is when Jesus walks on the sea, on the water. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship, okay, and to go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitudes away. Everybody got fed. He's done. He sends them away. They're all far away from wherever they're all going. So they sends them away. He tells his disciples go on the sea, and he'll catch up with them, he says. He says, I'll meet up with you. All right. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. And I think it's awesome that, like, even after all this, technically, Jesus still went and prayed and praised God, you know? Like, technically he just did another miracle for him and the people, like for their situation. So instead of being like, oh, you know, thanks, and then just like dip it out with the disciples, you know, he went to go praise God more and to talk to him, because that's what we're always supposed to do. A lot of times God will do things for us, and we just say thanks, we just accept it, and we don't give him praise. We don't continue to talk to him as much. Okay, when things are going good, we don't talk to God as much. Why is that? And then when things are rough, oh yeah, you best believe we'd be trying to ask God for more things and help us out more. Why is that? Why do we do that? You know, you got to think, and you got to remember on who has given you everything you have up to this point. It's so important, you guys. All right, now let's continue, because this gets really good. Verse 27. Okay. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. All right. So I'm going to guess in the fourth watch, I'm going to guess it's like fourth watch of the night. Might have been 4 days. Might have been like, I don't know. It's been a minute. The ship is on the sea. It's kind of far out there. There's a big storm. That's the gist of it. Okay. And then Jesus went to them. Okay. Jesus doesn't have a boat, but he has to get back to the disciples. He just got done praising and praying to God and talking to him again, which is, he felt the need to. He always does. That's why it's very important for us to always like maintain, and not just on the Sabbath day. For real, if God is, if the Bible is real, if God is real, right? It's our duty, it's our job to like talk to him and praise him every day, through the good and the bad. So then Jesus has to get to him. Jesus is not going to make a boat right now. Jesus is not going to make a raft right now. He's just going to go to them. And by God's allowance and power, he allowed him to walk on water. I would almost say if we were as in tune with God as Jesus was, I wouldn't be surprised on the miracles and things that he could do for us if our faith was that strong. I think we have been brainwashed so much to believe that science and the things, the materialistic and stuff here on earth has laws and limitations where it just doesn't work. Science says humans or anything with a certain amount of weight cannot walk on water. So we have believed that, and it puts that limitation, especially when it comes to our faith as well, that we just don't think it can happen. And it's very hard to overcome when we are taught at such a young age, because what God can do defies whatever science and like mathematics and anything that we see and hear in this world. Okay? Because it's through faith, and I'm talking that strong faith. Okay? So let's continue here. So he's walking on the sea towards them. Remember, there's a storm. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it's a spirit. And they cried out for fear. They say it's a ghost. They're scared because they've never seen anybody walk on water before. They know that without that kind of faith and God's will of power to allow it, that can't happen. Because it can't. The only thing that can make it happen is God's will and his power. But it has to do with the faith. Okay? Now, I'm not saying if you have that strong of faith and you're like, I'm going to walk on water, God, let me do it. No. It's not going to happen like that. It has to be God's will. Jesus had to get back to him. So he allowed him to walk on water. But more so, maybe even for a lesson for the disciples. Because listen to what happens next. This is very, very important, you guys. Verse 26. I want you guys to be able to see all this. Maybe right there. Oh, we have music on this whole time? I am so sorry. I am so sorry, you guys. Hopefully I've been talking loud enough where you guys been able to hear everything nice and clear. I usually shut that off. I forgot. All right, let's continue though. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they said he was a spirit, and they cried for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer, don't be afraid. It is I, don't be afraid. Okay? And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be you, bid me, allow me to come unto thee on the water. So basically Peter's saying, if it is you, can you allow me to come walk on water like you are? Let me come to you. Okay? Peter had enough faith that if it is him and he allows it, that he'll also be able to walk on water. Okay? Peter at this point did have enough faith. Okay? And it was God's will, because Jesus then says, you know, and he said, come. Okay? When Jesus said come, that is God's allowance. Okay? Because it's not like Jesus is gonna, like this, Jesus is actually flesh and blood and human being at this point. But it's the concept that Peter has enough faith and God is going to allow this to happen. Okay? But very pay attention to what's about to happen next. This is so good. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water. Okay? To go to Jesus. So, he's at least on the water. And it says he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So he's at least taken a couple steps. I don't know how close Jesus is at this time, but he's walking on the water. Okay? This is Peter. This ain't Jesus. Jesus has already been walking on the water. This is now Peter, who had enough faith at this particular time, because he has enough faith in Jesus, and whatever Jesus says, he will listen to. Okay? And that's the kind of faith that we have to have in God. Okay? That whatever God tells us, like, it's going to be okay. I got you. I'm going to handle it. Like I said, those limitations, God will intervene when he needs to. It's not our job to worry, ever, about anything. Anything. So keep that faith that God is got in the end, no matter what the outcome is or whatever, because we have an issue, and we could write on a piece of paper, you know, what we want, how we want it to work out. Oh, we want it to work out fast. We want it to go in this direction, like a job. Oh, I want to go to this place, for example, and I want to do it soon. Well, guess what? God might say it might take longer. Why? Because you already have a job. But also, he might say you're not going to go to that place. I'm going to have you go to a different place. Or I might have you stay where you're at. Maybe all this, what you want over here, is not really what's going to happen because it's not God's will. Okay? We might not understand why until it actually happens, but it's our job to have that faith all the way through and to not really get wrapped up into what we want, but more so what God wants for us. It's okay to pray for things if things are troubling and this and that, but always remember it's God's will of what's going to happen. Whatever the outcome is, it's his will, it's not ours. So leave it open. You can say it'd be awesome, like, you know, he already knows your thoughts. You probably don't even have to ask him. Like, if you want to go to a certain place, you could say, you know, God, I would really like to go over there. Because in our minds, we think it's going to be better, this and that, travel distance, or, you know, on pen and paper in a living situation or something, it just makes more sense to us. But it might not be what God wants. And if we fully understood why and what he's going to do, and then why he's going to do it, usually we do, but it's not until it actually happens. Okay? So you can ask, but you always have to say if it's your will to be done. Let him know that he's in control, and you're okay if it's not that. You might want this, you might want it to go this way, but you're okay if it doesn't go that way. You know why? Because God has you. God is in control. He's not going to let you fail. He's not going to let you just fall apart if the decision is different or the pathway is different. If anything, it's going to be better for you, because technically if you would have went down that route, it wasn't his will. Do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, you might have went to that other place, but then you might have, you know, maybe there's a layoff and then you end up getting laid off over there. You don't know. There could be 50 other things that happen bad over there. But so always when you ask God for something, you better know that you might not receive what you're asking for. And you might not even receive something similar to that. But whatever does happen, it's God's will for you, and it's for the better. And if you can't understand that and accept that, you're already having a problem with the faith that God is in control and that he will provide. And that so really you still want control of your life, and you're still trying to play God. You have to let God be God, and you have to be surrendered to him and allow him to do what he does best. Okay? So understand that. That's very, very important. Because now let's get it back into the verse, and you'll see what happens next to Peter, because Peter's walking on the water, right? Okay, we'll get into it and then I'll talk about it. Almost did a spoiler alert. And he said, "Come." And when Peter came, he's walking on water. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. Peter got afraid when he saw how strong the storm was. And now pay attention to timeline. Timeline is like the steps of what's happening, because that will tell us on why it happened. Okay? First, with his eyes, he noticed the storm. This whole time, it's all about faith. Did Peter need his eyes and ears to walk on water to get to Jesus? No, he didn't. Okay? And when I say eyes and ears, I don't like... God would have even directed him to Jesus, per se. But his eyes and ears got distracted by what they see in this physical world. Remember how I said, like, when things seem like they're dark or tough? That's what I mean by that. When life seems like it's beating you up, or you're having a tough situation in life, and like you start to get up, you start to get good, like something, you know, you lost your job, okay, you're broke. Well, you get another job, you start to get on your feet, and then all of a sudden, you know, they shut down or something. And then you just feel like you keep getting knocked down. That doesn't mean to lose your faith. If you lose your job somewhere and you're following God and you have 100% faith in him, it was for a reason. And realistically, maybe you went into that job without actually praying. Or you know what, I like to look at the positives of things, because if you were broke and then you started a job and it got you by for 6 months, hey, it got you by for 6 months. If you didn't have that job, you've been struggling even more for that 6 months if you didn't find a different job. So maybe it was a temporary job, and then all of a sudden, then God puts you somewhere like where it's more permanent or something. There's always outcomes. We don't understand it. Whenever a door closes, another one opens. And if you have God, he'll keep opening doors for you. You might get knocked down 1,000 times. You wanna know something? That's okay. And you wanna know something? Maybe he's just testing your faith. You know why? Because this whole life is a test. And the more stubborn we are, maybe the more tests we need. And I can relate to that. 100%. I think God put me through 1,000 tests just so that way he wanted to know if I was ready, if I actually was ready to commit. Okay? And because you have to be 100%. There's no lukewarm. All right? So here we go. Verse, where was I? Okay. So the wind was boisterous. He was afraid. Okay? So he noticed it, but then think about what it did to him. Okay? There's always a storm. We're always getting knocked down. But then he was afraid. Why was he afraid? If God is in control and you have 100% faith, you will not have fear. You're supposed to have fear of God and God alone. You don't fear anything else. You don't fear what Satan is putting in front of you. You don't fear the storm. You don't fear the bad things. You don't fear like that you're getting knocked down. None of that should bother you at all. Why? Because you have faith in God and God will direct you. In the end, no matter what, he's got you. We just don't see it right away. Okay? But when you get afraid, all of a sudden, you're now not having the faith that God is in control. And then what happens next? It says, and beginning to sink. He was walking on water this whole time. He was actually taking steps. I don't know about you, but if I was walking out, if God gave me the power to walk on water and I took more than 2 steps, he's going to let me take 100. He'll let me take 1,000. Right? Why not? Why can't he? If he's already done 2, I can do 1,000. I can do 1,000,000. But if I get distracted or I doubt that this storm is going to be able to overcome God and the physical, actual, like the science of this world, that like I'm going to sink. If I have that doubt just for a second, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to sink. 100%, you're going to start to sink. Because you no longer have that faith. Okay? It only takes a small doubt. And it's very hard because we're taught a certain way. Especially as young kids and stuff. Alright, let's continue. He cried. Peter's sinking, right? He's starting to sink. He knows he's no longer walking on water. He cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately, Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, now this is so very important. This relates to everything I was just talking about. So Jesus, the one who has 100% faith, the way we're supposed to, he screams out for Jesus to help him. Jesus reaches out his hand and saves him and says this, okay? He doesn't save him and say, oh, you did such a good job, or you were like, you almost had it. He doesn't say, like, don't worry, I got you now. He says this. He gives the answer on exactly why he started to sink. He goes, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Think about that for a second. O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? As soon as you have doubt, as soon as you think that God's not in control, as soon as you don't have 100% faith, you have now little faith. And having little faith is very, very bad. It's not a good place to be. Obviously, we have to build up our faith, but it's so important to understand all these different parables and situations that happen in the Bible to really understand and grasp how strong our faith is supposed to be. Okay? So, it's funny because, like, Peter had enough faith to walk on water and start going. And most of us would be like, Jesus is going to be nice and he's going to say, wow, you had such good faith for a while. No, he's going to say he's basically saying you failed because you doubted and your faith disappeared. Why is that? Think about that. He's asking him a question. Like, what? Like, why is that? Why did you? He's trying to get him to realize that you're not supposed to. I know it's so hard because we're taught a different way, you guys. It's about understanding and changing our minds and our thoughts on what we think is real and what happens. Because with God, there is no limits. There is everything we taught, everything we know is irrelevant. God can do anything. He says, with strong faith, you can move mountains. People be like, you can't move a mountain. Well, God can. Because it's God that does the power. But it's our job to have 100% faith for him to do whatever he is supposed to do through us. Okay? All right. Verse 32, let's see. We're almost done here. This is so very important to understand this. So good. So good. All right. And when they came, and when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. So God calmed the storm. It was a test. The storm, God allowed the storm to come. God knew that this was all going to happen. God can always see the future. But it's also more so, God allowed this to happen because, like, okay, let's think about this for 2 seconds, because this is how God works. And I want you to fully understand this, because this might help some people understand why bad things happen. Because this ain't that bad. He didn't drown. Okay, but I'll give a different example here in a second, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, when Jesus and them get back to the ship, like the storm dies down. Like, okay, like what are the chances of that, right? So like the storm represented, and I wouldn't be surprised if that storm was created by God, because he knew what was going to happen. So because it's in the Bible, it's a message, and this message goes further beyond than just Jesus and Peter and his disciples that saw it. It's written in the Word and in the Bible. And this thing has been around for 2,000 plus years. Do you understand that? So how many people in this world have read that message and this story? It's in the millions. It's in the hundreds of millions. It's in the billions. Yeah, I would say it's in the billions. There's 7.6 billion people or something right now. And this has been out for 2,000 years. So let's say over 1 billion people have been able to read, and hopefully they understood the message and the point that God is trying to make with this scenario. Okay? So it's a lot deeper than just trying to strengthen Peter and his disciples' faith, which I'm sure it did. But it also trickled and infected more people. Okay? Now that's where I'm going to get into where bad things can happen. Okay? So there's this movie. It's called Breaking Through. And it's about this kid who goes, him and his friends are on ice and he falls through. And he's under there for, I think, more than 15 minutes. Okay? He's under there for more than 15 minutes. And this is based on a true story. And this is one thing that really touched my heart, because I'm very mathematical and scientific, and the probability of it happening and like a miracle defies that. which is kind of like what we're talking about. Walking on water defies that. All right. So, he is under the ice for more than 15 minutes. Firefighters are there and they're searching for him. They can't find him. One of the firefighters, I'm getting a little bit chills, just like goosebumps a little bit here. All right. It's so good though. All right. So the firefighters are looking for the kid and they can't find him. And they're starting to give up hope. Okay. It's the same concept. They're giving up hope. Now this guy does not believe in God at this point. So let's say he's an atheist, right? So he doesn't believe in God. And he's searching for the body. Can't find it. And every second is crucial, right? At this point, we're starting to think, you know, he's completely gone, obviously, because hypothermia, even like drowning, like if you're underwater, come on now, you can only hold your breath for so long. And it's a kid. It's not like he's not the world champion at it. So he's searching. They're about to give up. Remember I said that limit of hope, like when God intervenes? Okay? At this point, a lot of us think he's already gone. Kid's already gone. Okay? When I say gone, he's no longer alive. Like there's no way they're going to find him, let alone resurrect him, right? God intervenes past that limit, guys. Okay? That's why a lot of times we kind of give up on God and we feel hopeless and like, you know, he's not going to, like, where is he, right? Why did this happen to me? Blah, blah, blah. So we start to cry about it and like lose hope. God intervenes. God says in a voice clear to this guy who does not believe. He says, turn around and go back. So they're searching everywhere. He's already cleared out this area. He's searching over here. They're about to give up. And he hears a voice. And he thinks it's somebody else. God spoke to this guy so clear, it sounded like, because he doesn't even believe, so like, he probably doesn't even have like the Holy Spirit, because he's not a believer. Okay? So, God had to do this to this guy. And this is based on a true story, you guys. The firefighter hears, go back and search. Search where he said that he heard to go back. So then he goes back where he came from and searches again and finds the kid. Okay? Finds the kid. He's under for 15 minutes. They take him out on a stretcher. They start to do CPR. They are on their way to the hospital, still doing CPR. For 45 minutes to an hour, they did CPR. And this kid has no pulse. He's been underwater for 15 minutes, CPR for 45 minutes, that's an hour. So over an hour that this kid has water in his lungs, drowned, hypothermia, no pulse. Okay? And they're still trying. They tried all the way that far. That's a long time to even try. The mom comes in to the doctor's office or the hospital. And they give up. They give up trying to do the CPR. And she is there in front of her kid. And he's laying there. No pulse. Pronounced dead. And she's obviously crying. And then she starts talking to God. And she said, and she's praying and she's saying, don't take him. Please don't take him. Dude, this is strong stuff. So please don't take him. Like, he has so much more to live for. He's so young. If it, like, please, like, if you're willing, just give him life. Don't let him go. This kid comes alive. He gets a pulse. Not from CPR. From a prayer. From a woman, which happens to be his mother, with 100% faith at that moment of time. She doesn't care about the scientific stats and this and that and the probability of and whatever may have you. She knows the power of God. And she had the faith that there is still a chance. There's always still a chance. I mean, John the Baptist It says it many times, and Jesus did miracles where they raised people from the dead. Okay? So God intervened and God allowed this. And this is something kind of recent, you guys. This is in our time. This is based on a true story. This isn't a movie. This is like real stuff. That chance and that miracle, science is going to try to like dictate it and give it a 0.0000001% chance that this happened and this is why. I'll tell you why it happened. It's because of God, and God allowed it. Okay? Plain and simple. But it's the understanding that faith in somebody has to be 100%. Later in that movie, they end up, people are doubting, okay? Just like when Peter started to sink, and Jesus said, thou with little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Okay, why? Like, where did you start to doubt? Okay, so when she's in this room with her son, and he's in a coma, he's in a coma this whole time, and doctors and science says that he's not going to be able to. He's going to be brain dead. He's not going to be able to like do things and stuff. He's going to be a vegetable or something. So on top of this first miracle, which is already crazy, then there's this other probability of like another miracle. And she, with 100% faith, and even the father was having doubts because his faith wasn't 100%. So he started to have doubts. And this mom is surrounded by all these doubts and negativity towards God and his power and his limit of what he can do. So she told everybody, if you have any doubts or skepticisms, or like if you're skeptic about it, or if you have any, I don't want to hear no negativity or doubts in this room. If you don't have faith that God can do it, you're not allowed in this room. Okay? She was putting her foot down saying, you guys don't understand the power of God. And if you don't have the power, if you don't understand the power of God, you shouldn't even be here, because why are you even there to begin with? Like, you know what I'm saying? You're giving up. You're giving up. You're just giving up. You're sinking. You're sinking just like this kid, like the kid's in a coma, but like technically you're doing worse because you're sinking, because you're doubting God. You don't have the faith that he can do it. So she tells them to like all get out, and you're not allowed here, this and that. So like it's like a lot of attention and stuff. They eventually gets to a point where they're about to take him off of, like, she even, I think in the movie, like he does like, you know, she's talking to him, the kid, and like he, like the Holy Spirit and him and her, and she's praying in God and this, and like, show me a sign, do something, and he does something, and she got a sign, okay, that everything's gonna be okay, and it's time to take him off of the breathing mechanism and stuff, because he's in a coma. So like things are keeping him alive, kind of. So, well, scientifically speaking. But she knows when they take it out that he's gonna be okay. So she tells them to do that, and that's gotta be pretty hard, right? You have to have 100% faith in God, because the doctor's going to say like, no, he still needs it, you know, this and that. But she had a sign when she was praying and talking to the kid, like he moved his finger or something. So once they did that, he ended up being able to fight it, like, because his lungs get collapsed when they take it out. He's got to like breathe on his own and this and that. It's pretty intense stuff when it comes to like the human body and stuff, anatomy or whatever. So he comes alive on his own, and he doesn't have any symptoms or problems. He's not brain dead. He's not a vegetable. He can walk. So like, I don't, like, maybe it took a week or two, I don't know. But even if not, like, it's irrelevant, doesn't even matter, because the probability of that even happening, on top of that other crazy part, God allowed all this to happen, and the kid is perfectly normal, and he's probably still alive, and he's probably had, like, that's his testimony, like, he can he can spread the word of the miracle of what happened to him, and so can his parents and that. But here's the thing. Something so bad happened, right? Just like the storm that was causing the boat to and everything to seem bad. Everything seemed like a mess. Everything seemed impossible. Okay? Just like in the movie when he's underwater and for so long in the CPR and then the brain dead part, all of it seems impossible, but God allowed it to happen. That movie, I can promise you it touched me, and it touched me at a good time because that's what really started to get me back on track. I still wasn't like, just because I watched the movie, I wasn't like, oh, I'm back, God, I'm 100% faith and this and that. But that was very powerful to me because I'm very mathematical and this and that. And God did a lot of other stuff in my life personally to speak and show me how strong and real he is. So that was huge. And so that right there, just like I said, this message here in the Bible has reached billions of people. That movie right there reached millions of people. Okay, so God lets bad things happen for a reason, and we don't understand it or see it in the moment of time. Because you got to think, God's not gonna protect us from all bad things and evil or just bad things in general, because our consequences of our actions will still happen. The kids were playing on thin ice. The ice fell because of their weight and where they were. Okay, so of course that can happen. Were they supposed to be on the ice to begin with? No, especially if it's that thin, because technically you can go on ice, but it has to be thick enough where like it just, for a fact that even at its weakest point that it's still strong enough. Obviously the bigger the harder it is, but because there's things like ice fishing and stuff like that. I'm not saying don't go on ice, but there has to be a certain thickness and whatnot for it to be considered safe. So these kids were playing on ice that probably wasn't safe. That is the consequence of their action. God's not gonna just, he could if he wanted to, but like, if in the moment of time, God could have sent an angel as the kid was like starting to sink. He was able to the angel might have grabbed his hand and helped him to reach further up on the ice to be able to get out. But that's not how God had this planned out. God allows things to happen for a deeper meaning than what we know or think. God doesn't have to intervene right then and there. He was testing the mother's faith. He knew he could use this story to touch millions of people, or let alone just me in general. Okay? Like if you want to talk small scale, that would be a small scale. I'm the only one that saw the movie, but it touched my heart. Okay, well, and then it also tested the mother's faith. And guess what? I'm sure it strengthened a lot of other people's faith that was inside the area personally, like the father, the family, the doctors, okay? The firefighter. Oh, by the way, let's finish talking about that real quick. The firefighter himself in the movie ends up talking to his chief and says, he goes like, what happened out on the ice? And he's like, I heard you tell me to go back. And he goes, I never said that. He goes, yeah, I heard it like loud and clear. Like it was a loud voice. It said to go back. He goes, no one told you to go back. And he's like, what? He's like, do you know who that was, right? And he goes, no. He goes, that was God. And he goes, well, that's a problem. And he goes, well, why is that a problem? He goes, because I don't believe in God. Remember how I said, like, the Holy Spirit will help us and guide us, okay? It's our thought in our head. Even if it's small, it's our job not to ignore it. So, like, if he was a believer and stuff and had 100% faith, he would have probably heard that voice. Like, okay, no one else heard the voice. Okay, no one else heard the voice. But, like, how it would be a small thought for somebody who's a believer. Somebody who's not a believer, God had to be a lot more loud. He had to be louder. Why? Because the guy didn't even believe in it. So he had to be strong enough that this guy thought he heard the voice through his ears. That's how loud God spoke to this non-believer to make this miracle happen, because it all started with that guy. Okay? Just realize that, because if he didn't go back, he would have never found him. They would have gave up, blah, 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 blah. Miracle would have never even happened. But God knew that everything was going to happen the way it is going to, that he had to speak loud enough to this guy, and he knew if he did, that he would actually listen. Because, I mean, obviously, if you hear and you think it's your chief, you're going to listen. You're obeying commands. So it's just, that's what's so powerful about this movie. It's called Breaking Through. I highly suggest watching it at least once. It's based off of a true story. It's really good, really good. So God does allow bad things to happen, because, and even when you get knocked down, like, for example, like the kid's under for 15 minutes. Okay, that's okay, first of all, they fell through the ice. Okay, that's a knockdown. In this situation, that's a knockdown. He's down there for 15 minutes and they can't find him. That's a knockdown. They eventually find him. Okay, they're starting to get up. CPR for 45 minutes. That's a knockdown. No pulse. He eventually comes alive through prayer. Back up on his feet. Like, the situation is going positive. Then, he's going to be, he's in a coma. That's a knockdown. He's not going to be able to, science says that he's going to be brain dead and a vegetable. That's a knockdown. But that's all through complete doubt. But every single time, God gets him back up. God gets him back up. The situation just gets, it's just like that. But that's just God testing faith. Because if the mother lost faith, then maybe that kid would be a vegetable. Maybe even previously, if she lost her faith during the process, then he would have been a vegetable. But if she would have lost her faith before that, he would have never came alive. Do you understand? So it's understanding, just like Peter when he was walking on water, we have to have 100% faith. Because right there, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? You cannot doubt God in any situation, little or big or small. Okay? We all have our problems. I get it. Life's not great. It's not grand. It's not heaven. Not yet. All right. So let's continue. Almost done here. So then they came onto the ship, and then the storm calmed down. Okay? Ironic, right? Then they were in the ship, came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth, thou art thou Son of God. So now they are strong believers when they saw him walk on water and allowed Peter to walk on water. Like, it's hard not to believe at that point, right? They should have already believed by then. Him doing all these miracles and the things he was saying and doing previously. Some people need a little bit more. I mean, these disciples, you guys, these disciples seen so much at this point. Peter saw so much, and he still doubted that he could continue to walk on water towards Jesus through that storm when he got distracted. Like, he still had doubts. That's how crazy it is. That's how important it is. It's so important to keep strengthening your faith. Like those seeds, the seeds that we talked about last stream, it's so important to keep our roots growing. Because if the roots are not long enough, we will be like those plants that were in the rocks. When things get too tough, which is like the sun coming up, it'll scorch us and we will die. Our faith and everything we built will die. So we will fall apart, fall away from God. And God will not work in our life. God will not work in your life unless you have that faith, you guys. Is that important? God can do amazing things, but only if you have the 100% faith. And then it has to be his will. It has to be, first is the faith, then comes his will. And it might be different than what we think. All right, let me see here. This goes all the way through, yeah? All right. So they are like saying, oh, you definitely are the true Son of God. is what they're saying. Surprised I even didn't know that by now. Because we don't get to see that kind of stuff every day, you guys. The more and more this life has come and more corrupted it is, the harder it is for miracles and things to happen and see. And if we get too wrapped up in our daily lives and sin, we'll never see it. We'll never experience it. The true power of God. And when they were, okay, verse 34. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all of the country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him, and they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole. I want you to understand this for a second. People heard that Jesus was there. They already heard of the miracles that he was healing and fixing people. These people were so sick and diseased or whatever that they hit rock bottom with it, that they were like, this is my only hope. This is the only chance I have. Like, he can do it. If anybody can do it, he can do it. That is the faith that I'm talking about. These are like non-believers, okay? But they heard that he was the Messiah, and they know of the Bible, or maybe they were followers even of the Bible, and they believed that it could be him because he's already done these miracles elsewhere, and now he's coming here to them. So they come running towards him. They're like, I gotta see him. I have to see him. He can help me. I know he can. That kind of faith is what they had. All they had to do was touch his garment, because there were so many. There were so many in this new area that were diseased and stuff and needed to be healed. Jesus knew this. God knew this, technically. God knew this, so he allowed even Jesus's garment, when they go to touch it, that they would be cleansed and healed. Okay? Because God knew how strong faith they had. Just like the other miracles, when it was like one person at a time, and he said, forgive you of your sins. Or he would sometimes be like, you have super strong faith. You have some of the strongest faith I've ever seen. Okay, that's what these people had. And then he would be like, forgive you of your sins, you are healed. So it's the same concept. Same concept, but it's that strong faith is how God can work. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. That was a great chapter. Hopefully you guys got a little something out of it. I know I did. And then, so next week, we're just going to do 15 and 16, okay? We're going to actually do both chapters, like 39 verses and then 28, so. And then there's no extra stuff, so it should be, we should be able to knock out 2 chapters there. So I appreciate it, you guys. I hope everybody has a good week. Until next Sunday, I'll see you guys then, and God bless. Take care. See you next time.